Let's bring in NBC News analyst Misty Marris on what jurors will be weighing as they prepare to deliberate. Misty, good morning. So much emotion, so many heightened emotions surrounding this case. It's bringing up issues of race, the makeup of the jury, perhaps discrimination. As a juror, how do you tune all that out and just focus on the evidence?
So the jury is going to be instructed that the only things they can consider is what came in during the trial, and the judge will spend some time today giving those instructions in court. But there is so much activity outside of the courtroom. It's likely one of the reasons why the jury is actually sequestered through deliberations. So they'll be in a really controlled environment while they determine the outcome of this case.
I thought it was interesting the prosecution called 21 witnesses, the defense just 3, and Karmelo Anthony never took the stand despite what we saw in that body cam footage. In the end, so much of this case comes down to whose version of events the jurors are going to believe. How do you go about weighing the credibility of the witnesses in this case or in any case?
Yeah, so we have really grainy footage in this case that shows the altercation that happened, but it's so difficult to see that it's necessary for witnesses who were there to actually describe what they saw. Yeah. And that's what played out in the courtroom. In a self-defense case, there's a very specific standard, and it's subjective and objective, meaning first, the jury has to determine whether Karmelo Anthony truly felt subjectively in his mind that there was a threat of grave bodily injury or death. Then they have to determine whether or not that belief was reasonable, the objective standard. So that's what the jury is going to weigh. The other aspect that the jury will have to take into consideration is whether or not they believe Karmelo Anthony was the initial aggressor or provoked the incident, which would not allow him to avail himself of a self-defense argument. So those are going to be all the factors. You usually don't hear defendants testify. That's very common. Yeah. But in a self-defense case, it's more challenging because of the fact that you have to understand what's in their head and what they perceived the threat to be in order to use a self-defense argument. And that's because usually the defense doesn't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Once they claim self-defense, they do have to prove something in court.
So with closing arguments today, what do jurors need to hear to maybe tip the scales in their mind that they haven't already heard through the evidence?
So the jurors are not only going to hear closing arguments, which wraps up and puts all of the evidence together for the prosecution and the defense, laying out all of the arguments, but what they'll also hear are the jury instructions. So the legal requirements that need to be proved by the prosecutors, that they have the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's how they have to apply everything they heard in the courtroom against the standards of the law. So today is going to be a really consequential day in court.
Really sad when you look at the young lives that have been at stake throughout all of this. Misty Marris, thank you so much for your insight.